While the 1920s is known as a time of progressivism and flapper dresses, it's also a time of mild African American advancement in the United States. The most notable event of the 1920s that marked a new era for African Americans was the Great Migration. The Great Migration saw the movement of millions of African Americans from the rural South to the urban North. This migration provided better economic opportunities and improved living conditions for many African Americans, as well as contributed to the growth of urban Black communities and increased political influence. The 1920s also saw an emergence of civil rights organizations like the NAACP, but with these advances also came a massive increase in racial riots and violence, like lynchings and the resurgence of the KKK, as well as racial segregation and discrimination still persisting in society. The Red Summer can be described as a series of racial riots and lynchings that happened in 1919. These incidents occurred across the country in rural and in urban communities alike. The first story I would like to mention is the Courtney brothers, who were both students of the University of Maine. They were both hunted down by a mob of students who led them to campus with nooses hung around their necks and were forced to strip, tar, and feather each other. In this incident, no arrests were made, and it was not documented at all in the press. The next story I'd like to mention is about a teacher in Longview, Texas, who was beaten to death for publishing an anonymous article about a lynching that occurred in the area. But in this case, law enforcement and military did get involved. And then finally, I'd like to mention the incident in Knoxville, Tennessee. This occurred on August 30th and was one of the largest riots of the Red Summer. There was a mob that stormed the county jail looking for a man named Maurice Mays, who was accused of murdering a white woman. This mob couldn't find him in the jail, so instead they looted the jail and fought a gun battle with a predominantly Black community in the area. Reports say that 2 people were killed, but eyewitnesses' accounts say that the death toll was much higher than that. In this case, law enforcement did get involved here, and they broke up the riot by firing machine guns into the crowd. Well, I guess not at people, but all 3 of these stories are very different in nature. They had different outcomes and involved different groups of people in different states. So it's clear that these violence and riots were just happening across the country. Here we have not exactly an eyewitness report or testimony, but it is a telegram between Sheriff Watson from Dublin, Georgia, and Governor Hugh Dorsey from Atlanta, Georgia. This is an offer from the governor of Atlanta to the sheriff of Dublin of a $500 reward for the conviction of a man who was accused of murder in his county. The governor expresses the importance of the sheriff doing everything in his power to prevent him from getting lynched. In this case, it just kind of shows like how serious lynching was and how it was taking over the country in this Red Summer. And on this slide, we see a quote from an editorial from W.E.B. Du Bois. In 1918, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote an editorial asking African Americans to set aside their differences and, quote-unquote, close ranks in the war. But almost a year later, he wrote another editorial stating, this country of ours, despite its better souls have done and dreamed, it's yet a shameful land. He explains how the U.S. lynches, disenfranchises, doesn't educate, steals, and insults African Americans in this country. And based on this editorial, in the crisis and the vast differences between his opinions previously and then after experiencing and witnessing all of the violence in the Red Summer. I do think that Du Bois supporters would be in agreement with him to fight back for their own democracy and freedom at this point.